In this section, we are going to walk through the AIR interface. We looked at the home screen earlier. Now we are going to delve a lot deeper into some of the other options. So we've covered the home screen icons. I think we covered all of them in the last section. We also did the identity and access. We looked at the virtual private cloud on demand in some depth. We looked at the drop-down options right hand side. We looked at the billing and so on. What we did not really cover, we just skimmed over that, were the virtual data centers, the virtual machines, the resource usage we did cover. We just very briefly looked at networks and gateways as well. We did look at the various regions, and the Bitnami source templates are such an exciting feature of AIR that we do need to spend some time on this. And then I'm going to show you how to get the vCloud API URL right at the end in a small section of the course. Probably in putting it all together, I will give you an idea how one can use the vCloud API and make REST, R-E-S-T, representational state transfer calls to vCloud AIR. Actually, just as a piece of information, the interfaces that we are using, if you have some kind of a REST client running, you can see that basically that interface is doing gets, puts, and posts to the API. It's just something interesting that you might want to take a look at, but we will look at just very briefly at the API URL, and later on we'll see how we can use it simply to log on and do nothing much there, because the focus of the course is really more on vCloud AIR and using it directly using the user interfaces as well as the vCloud AIR interface. And so here I am logged in again. As we did in the previous section, I will go to my service ID that I'm using for this course, and it's going to log me in into my interface. One thing which we are going to look at right now would be the regions. Now, we did cover the regions before. We said that you have the ability to actually stage your workload and actually have it in production in any region. So let's take a look at this. So right now, this is the US Virginia 1.4 region, but the other regions that we saw earlier show up here as well, and you have the ability basically to connect to any one of those regions and then build your virtual data center, which is the first step in that region. So right now I'm in the US Virginia region, as you can see, right? And I have two virtual data centers there. One is the VDC1, which is the default data center that was set up for me, and then we have the INE VDC2, which I set up myself for this course. Let's very quickly take a look at the German implementation there, and when I click on that drop down, it's going to do single sign-on. This is very neat actually. Single sign-on. I'm now in vCloud AIR in Germany, and it is loading a list of virtual data centers for me that I have created in the cloud in the German data center. So here we are. I have one data center that I created there. This was the initial one that they created for me because it is named VDC1. I do have a virtual machine running in there. I can check my resource usage in Germany, and here's my resource usage in Germany. I can check my gateways, and again you will see that it is simply called gateway. Simply called gateway because it's the default gateway that they have set up as part of the default VDC. I did assign another public IP to it, and we'll see how to do that later. And you should see the default network that they provided me. So anytime you set up the VDC, you get VDC. Anytime you set up an account, you get VDC1, and then you get one gateway, which is called gateway, and you get one network, which is called default routed network. And then you can go in there and change the name of the VDC if you like, and you can go in there and create another network, which I did. So I have created one more network in Germany. I have a different set of private IPs assigned to that, and I have some different public IPs, and we are going to use the implementation in Germany, which is this, and the implementation in Virginia, where I have also set up virtual data centers. So you can see at this point in time, I have a data center in Germany, which is called VDC1, and I have two data centers in Virginia. It's going to take me back to Virginia, two data centers in Virginia. So here I am back in Virginia. It's loading a list of virtual data centers in Virginia that I have, and we know that I have two of them. And we will just wait a little bit. Here we are. So we have the two data centers we are familiar with, right? So that's how this actually works at a region level. I can create a data center in any region that I want. So for example, if I want to create a data center in US Virginia, it knows that I don't yet have any virtual machines there. So it says, do you want to create virtual machines in US California 13 location? And if I say yes, it will start the process of creating a VDC for me. And then when the VDC has been created, I can actually go in there exactly like I went to Germany just now, virtually speaking, and access my workloads there. So I'm going to say no, because obviously it takes a little bit of time, usually about 10 minutes at the most, but it does take a little bit of time. So I'm not going to do that, but just understand and remember that it's easy to move your workload or to set up your workload anywhere in the world. You just click on that. If I wanted to go to Australia, I would click on that. It'll ask me, want to create virtual machine in Australia. If I say yes, it'll create my VDC there. And once it knows I have a VDC there, then it obviously won't ask me this again. Okay, so very easy to set up your workloads all over the world. Okay, let's go back to the one that I've created specifically for this course. I have INE VDC2, and we will create a new virtual machine in the next section of this course. But at this point in time, let's just take a look at what we have in here. So I have that virtual machine. It's a CentOS 6332-bit. If I click on the resource usage, it'll show me the detailed resource usage for that virtual machine, which is quite brilliant. It'll show me the various settings that are there. So it's powered on. It has VMware tools installed in it, one CPU, 1 gig memory, and it has so much of storage. And then guest customization is on, which means it gets new IP addresses, and then initial password. So I have the initial password, that's that initial password that's on it. And then obviously what I can do is I can set up a connection directly to this machine, which we will do later on. So let's look at the networks for this virtual machine. So this virtual machine is actually connected to the gateway, which has an external IP address, or the public IP address of 144.243.185.24, and the virtual machine IP is 192.168.109.2. Now remember this, because .1 is automatically set up as the gateway address, so this is .2. Okay, and we'll talk much more about this when we look at networks in some detail shortly. Monitoring, so this is the monitoring as it's been going on, the CPU usage of that machine. So you can see it's very powerful, and the interface is actually very easy to use. And we looked at, in my on-demand cloud, we looked at the INE VDC and a specific virtual machine called this, which is in that VDC. So we go back to the virtual private cloud, and here we are back again. Now when I select one of these machines, I have this. I'm sorry, we're going to go. We can open the virtual machine console, so you can log in directly to that virtual machine, or you can manage the virtual machine in vCloud Director. So let's just briefly click on that, because we saw this before. Remember, there are two interfaces. There's the VMware vCloud Air interface, and there is also the vCloud Director interface. So this is now in the vCloud Director interface, and we're looking at that virtual machine whose name is this, and here it is running. So when I can select this and I look at the actions for this, I can pop out a console for this. I can power, suspend, shut down, reset. Some of these options are available in the Air interface as well. I cannot insert and eject DVDs and so on, which obviously you would put in if you're installing software, for example. Install VMware Tools was not available there, and I can create snapshots, and this is obviously all standard vSphere terminology, where you can create a snapshot of this, and then you can revert back to a specific place there. So as an example, if you are upgrading an existing virtual machine, you take a snapshot of the virtual machine prior to the upgrade of software, and when the upgrade is done, you verify your upgrade. If the upgrade is not okay, then you can revert back to that snapshot you took before the upgrade. And of course, if everything is fine, then you can delete that snapshot and move on. So I have not created a snapshot here, so that's why I can't revert to a snapshot. Again, this is all very standard vSphere terminology and aspects. Now let's look at the networking. It'll show us how it is actually connected to the network. So here we are. We can see that that machine is directly connected to the default routed network. I just scoot this over a little bit to the right hand side, and you can see default routed network. It's pending because I haven't set up everything properly at this point in time for this virtual machine anyway. I look at the virtual app diagram, and this is probably a piece that I actually like quite a bit. And I know this is vCloud Director, not so much VMware Air, but still this is all important. So it gives you a graphical representation there. I mean, if you click on that, you'll get your console, which we don't want to see at this point in time. If you hover your cursor over that NIC adapter, you can see then it's a NIC 0, and it has an address of 192.168.109.2, and it is connected to the default routed network. It's very sensitive on the mouse buttons. Okay, so I'll go back there. Okay, so here we are. It's connected to the default routed network, as we know. So this graphical representation is really interesting. Now you have the ability in this virtual machine to add a second network adapter, a second NIC, and then if you had a second network available, you can actually connect that NIC to that network, and when you restart the machine, I don't have hot add on, so that you have to restart the machine, but that would work just fine as well. So the VApp diagram is something I use quite a bit. Now let's just take a look at the options here. Now I have been talking in terms of one virtual machine, but really you see this now, it says it's a virtual app diagram, and when I hover the cursor here, it says add a virtual machine. So what this means is that in VMware Air terminology, or in vCloud Director terminology, this virtual app is a little bit different of an idea than it is for in vSphere. Here it is more of a container with networking and so on. So I could actually add another VM into this virtual app. Okay, and then for example, if I click on this, here we go, it says add virtual machine. Now a few things we can look at here. It's still plugging away. Okay, here we go. A few things in vCloud Air, and again inherited from vCloud Director, is that you can have catalogs. You can have a catalog of templates, you can have a catalog of virtual machines, you can have catalog of media, and so on, and we will look at some of those things in just shortly. But again, intuitively speaking, right, you have your own organization catalogs, and you have the public catalog. In this case, the public catalog is the Air catalog. So when I have nothing, I have only in my organization catalog, I have just the one virtual machine that I have actually started, right? But let's look at the public catalog. In the public catalog, you will see a whole bunch of pre-configured VMs, CentOS VMs, 32 and 64 bit, and then you have, in this case, some other ones like Photon and so on in the public catalog, right? So you could actually select from there and move on. And it's very simple. You know, you can use an existing one. I click on this, okay, then I say add it in here, it gets added here, or can get a new virtual machine. Okay, so I can configure the resources for that. If I click on configure resources, it's chugging away. And I suppose I click next here to get me to configure resources. It tells me what storage policy I can use. Now there are two storage policies that are available here in VMware Air. So you can put your storage on SSDs or on standard spinning disk. So I select standard spinning disk, I hit next, and I can select networks, and obviously when I click on that, I get the networks that are actually available. And then you can assign IPs and so on, and we'll do this when we actually create a virtual machine in the next section. So I'll cancel out of that just to give you a preview of what is available. This is, again, remember, vCloud Director. So I go to home and I have two virtual machines running there. You see them in a different way here, right? Because if I go to the vCloud Air interface, I see these virtual machines in this manner, which is CentOS and VM25. And if I go to the other vCloud Director interface, then I see them in this manner. So it's a tad different. Okay, so we are back here. I already showed you the. We go to INE VDC, and of course you can power on and power off these. Power off the machine is available at this point in time. These are the actions. I can edit the name and description. I can edit the resources. I can change owners. Remember, you have the ability to add other users to this, and you can change the owner of this machine. Right now I'm the administrator, so everything is in my name, but you can change that. And of course you can manage in vCloud Director. We look at this when we look at the virtual at adding a virtual machine, but basically what all it is it's a shortcut in vCloud Air. What it does is it opens up the firewall and it opens up the gateway as well to give you connectivity to this virtual machine. That's what this does. Kind of tries to simplify things. I like to do it in the old-fashioned granular manner, so that I know exactly what I'm doing and why it's working. And I'll show you an existing virtual machine and how it's connected up. Gateways. We've seen the gateways before as well. You can't add a new gateway, but you can certainly look at the gateway. So let me get the. If I just click on this right now here, it shows you the Air interface, which allows me to NAT rules. Okay, so I can add source NAT or destination NAT, and you can see I've done a few of those things here, and we will use them. I can firewall rules are also accessible. I've opened it up completely. It's obviously not a good thing to do in production. Okay, but you can always add firewall rules, and we look at this in great depth when we look at the edge gateway firewall section. The networks that are connected to this. So there are two private networks you can see. One is a 7220/16 network, and the other one is a 192.168.109/24 network, which is the default routed network. This is as good a place as any to tell you that the default network, when it's set up, is always, I have seen anyway, on 192.168.109. So if you create your own networks anywhere else, it's good practice not to use the same private network, because with VPN you should probably have, it's possible to get around it, but it's a hack. Probably want a different network, so you put in different private networks, so you have at least some indication that you are not in the same region. You're working in a different region. Some of the actions here, of course, manage in vCloud Director, because some of the really good actions or the really important ones, like load balancing, static routes, and VPNs, are available only in Cloud Director interface. Let's look at the public IPs. So I'm loading the public IP list that I have for my gateways in the US Virginia 1.4 region. So I have these available to me. So going back to INE VDC2, I click here, and we have the last thing to do would be see the networks, which again you see them here. You could see them through the gateways, and we can just take a quick look at how they are managed in vCloud Director as well. And of course it will show up there. And these are the networks showing up here in vCloud Director. Now, since we are here, uh, we can see that there are many other settings that would have to be done, and we will cover these in detail as part of the vCloud Direct interface. So, in a manner of speaking, by going directly into vCloud Director and becoming reasonably familiar with that vCloud Director interface is actually a good thing, because it gives you then a real good understanding of some of the simplicity that shows up in the Air interface, and that is a benefit because some things you can do very simply there in Air much better than you can do in vCloud Director, but there are certain things you can do only in vCloud Director. So to understand fully vCloud Air, you need to have some basic understanding of vCloud Director, which we are going to cover in this course. Now it's time to look at some of the icons we have not looked at so far, these two. The first one is Bitnami. So when you create a virtual machine in Air, you have not only those source templates that are available in Air itself, but also Bitnami as well. And when I click on this, I should be in Bitnami. And this is the Bitnami library that is available, and you can see you have pre-configured virtual machines here. Okay, and the categories, you have all these categories here. Take your pick. We just scroll through some of these. So of course there's WordPress, we have multi-site WordPress. For bug tracking, we have something called Redmine. For media sharing, we have OwnCloud, and for content management, we have Drupal. Some really interesting ones. We have the entire LAMP stack here for infrastructure. We have Ruby, and you must be familiar probably with CMS. I'm not. Django, of course. I'm an infrastructure guy. PHP. I don't really tend to use PHP, but of course there are PHP gurus out there that are watching this video, and you can see, I mean, there's a whole bunch of these very nicely set up and actually very easy to use, and we will take a look at one of them. What we're going to do is we will look at the LAMP stack. So we will click on launch, and what it says is that I need to sign up before continuing. Now as it happens, I have a Bitnami account that I already set up, and what I'm going to do is to log on to Bitnami to show you what is possible here. I am now logging in. I might have selected a shorter password, but if this is correct, then we are going to be in Bitnami. Now, when I set up my account, there's also a Bitnami vault. The VMware Air or vCloud Air user ID password is now that I have is now linked to Bitnami, so that I can go to Bitnami when I'm setting up virtual machines, and the two are seamlessly connected. Bitnami stores that Air user ID and password in its vault, so I need to unlock that vault. And I am now unlocking that vault so that it can pick up that user ID password for Air. And if I have keyed everything in correctly, yes, I have. Alright, so we are creating a new virtual machine. Instead of using the source templates available in vCloud Air, we are using the Bitnami Launchpad for VMware vCloud Air. We logged into Bitnami, we logged into the vault so it could pick up the user ID password and send it across to vCloud Air, and now the two are actually seamlessly connected. It's really very, very cool. You can see, you can change the name of your virtual machine. Okay, so my LAMP. There's a choice of LAMP images available as well, a whole bunch of them. Okay, so you have all this available. These actually are not all LAMP images, they are other product images, but anyway you can select that. We go back to LAMP because that's where we started. It tells you the server properties, one CPU, and I can kind of scoot this across and say I'm going to give it a 4 CPU virtual machine with 16 gig of memory and one, hey, why not more? I will give it whatever number comes up, 5 or 6 GB. We're going to put it on SSD. No, we're going to put it on standard, and the cost comes down, I think, from $30 to, yeah, it's half the price. I can give it a public IP address. It's not really, it's a infrastructure LAMP stack, so it doesn't talk to the internet really. And you can get online support at 7% from vCloud Air on demand online support for an estimated cost of $330 a month. Now if I went forward with this, that's what would happen. Now of course it says routed network is required to connect this to the internet, okay, otherwise it will be in an isolated network. I can choose VDCs, so it shows up in the INE VDC too because that's where I was, but I could say I want to put it in the other VDC, okay, and then it says, well, what networks are available, and I know I want to set up my routed network. So this Bitnami connects directly to VMware vCloud Air and just moves things back and forth. It's really excellent, as you can see. So you have a whole choice. I'm going to cancel out of this before I make a mistake and get charged $300. I canceled out of that, and then of course I'm in Bitnami. I create a new virtual machine, and the same sort of thing you can install any kind of server that you want. Okay, so I am going to log out of sign out. Okay, I'm going to sign out of Bitnami. Okay, and I'm going to close that, and I'm going to go back to my launch pad here. Here we go, the Air interface, right? And that's what we did by simply. So we took that. It's not a detour, it's an integral part of vCloud Air. The number of source templates available to you is just absolutely tremendous, and those are all very high quality, and I believe in all those cases they are updatable as well. So as soon as there are bug fixes or security updates or any such thing, those images are automatically updated for you. A really excellent way to, in a very simple manner, to get some very sophisticated capabilities. And remember, you use the Bitnami source templates, all that application capability available to you, right? And you can put your workload in any region of the world through vCloud Air. So put it all together, Bitnami plus vCloud Air, and that is just absolutely tremendous in what you can do. Now, we've said this many times, vCloud Air is underlying platform is vCloud Director. You can see this link always shows up there. Usually you can manage things in vCloud Director as well. The vCloud Air interface is the simpler interface. However, there may sometimes be a need to do some programming to the API. Now vCloud Director has an API, as you know, and so does vSphere. All the vSphere products have an API, and actually most VMware products have an API. It's either an XML API if it's a slightly older product, SOAP XML kind of thing, or if there are more modern products, then you have a REST, R-E-S-T, Representational State Transfer API that's available. So all the programming you see here is done against the API for vCloud Director, but there's also an API for vCloud Air that is out there as well. Okay, and you can actually program to vCloud Air, or you can program to vCloud Director. In this case, you can't because you don't. VMware doesn't give you the ability to do that because of obviously security issues and stuff like that. But if you had your own vCloud Director instance, then of course you could do that. And to do that, you need an API endpoint. So the vCloud Director API endpoint that is there is actually this API URL, which is this whole string here. Okay, the organization is this. So again, this is a construct out of vCloud Director. We'll talk about this in some of the basics, but when you create an on-demand or any other account with VMware Air, then what happens is that they give you an organization. This is obviously a UUID, very a very complicated kind of a name, but you can actually change this. Okay, that has to be used when you do REST calls to the API. So just an FYI at this point in time, this is where you get this, and towards the end of the course, we will make a short foray into looking at how one can actually use REST calls to some simple things that basically log on to vCloud Air. So with that, I think we have covered all the aspects of this section that I had intended to do. We looked at the vCloud API RLL. We looked at Bitnami, a tremendously powerful tool. We know that we have global coverage from vCloud Air, or from Australia, Japan, a couple of places in Europe, all the way into multiple regions in the US. We looked at the gateways, the networks. We looked at things like the virtual data centers. We looked at the virtual machines and how you could do that. So this is a pretty extensive walkthrough that we've done through the vCloud Air interface. So hopefully at this point in time you're getting very comfortable with this, and with that we will end this section, and we will implement virtual machines in vCloud Air in the next section and get access to it through the internet.